Star Wars games have been suffering heavily in the recent years, and it's hard to believe that one of the most iconic franchises ever is being completely sidelined by delays, cancellations, and poor decisions from gaming companies. Over time, we have seen countless Star Wars projects that were announced, including open world sandboxes, multiplayer games, and single player experiences with unique concepts and ideas that we hadn't seen before. Many of them even had the potential to completely redefine Star Wars gaming as we know it. So, in this video, I want to take a closer look at the wasted potential behind some of these projects and how they could have completely changed the future of Star Wars gaming if they only received the right support. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like as it helps the channel a lot, but now, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's start with Star Wars 1313, probably one of the biggest what-ifs in all of Star Wars gaming. In 2012, LucasArts revealed the gameplay for the title at E3, and it immediately caught people's attention. It didn't feature any Jedi, lightsabers or force powers. Instead, it followed a young Boba Fett, navigating the criminal underworld of Coruscant. More specifically, level 1313, considered the most dangerous part of the city, filled with bounty hunters, gangs, and various kinds of illegal activities. What made the game stand out was the tone. It wasn't a typical Jedi vs Sith narrative, which we had often seen, but it actually aimed for something much darker and more mature than most Star Wars stories at the time. It was even meant to tie into Star Wars Underworld, a live-action series that was in early development and also was set on Coruscant. The gameplay showcased third-person action, traversal of parkour elements, and environments that honestly looked incredible at the time. The developers said that they were inspired by Uncharted for the movement and GTA for the open world feel, which just shows how ambitious the project was. Many fans began imagining how the darker setting could introduce elements that we'd never really seen in Star Wars before, specifically horror. The underworld of Coruscant is full of mystery and danger, so it will be interesting to explore some abandoned Sith tombs, dark ruins, or other unknown threats. The neon-lit setting would have created an atmospheric tone similar to what we've seen in Cyberpunk 2077 or Ghostwire Tokyo. Of course, Star Wars 1313 wouldn't have looked as good due to the hardware at the time, but it still had the potential to be one of the most atmospheric Star Wars games ever made. So what exactly happened to the title? Not long after the reveal, LucasArts was shut down following Disney's acquisition of the Lucasfilm. The trademark was never renewed and the game was completely cancelled. What's even more annoying is that in 2015, the Lucasfilm president herself, Kathleen Kennedy, even stated that the concept for the game was outstanding and that they spent a lot of time looking at it to see how it could be reused. Apparently, some concepts were later repurposed for the Mandalorian show, which, with all due respect to how good it was only a fraction of what we could have gotten from Star Wars 1313. Over time, we have seen a few more glimpses and some further gameplay from the title, but unfortunately, nothing ever came of it. It's a huge shame that the project never saw the light of day. We already had plenty of games exploring the light side and dark side, so a more grounded title would have definitely brought some innovation to the genre. And while Star Wars Outlaws borrowed some of those ideas, it doesn't come close to the general concept of Star Wars 1313. Considering the game would have launched way before Jedi Fallen Order or The Mandalorian, it also had the chance to set a new direction for Star Wars storytelling, especially since at the time we knew almost nothing about Boba Fett and his backstory. In the end, Star Wars 1313 wasn't simply cancelled, but it was also a result of Disney's corporate restructuring, and we never got anything else like it. And that's why it's still such a huge missed opportunity. You had fresh gameplay ideas, and a dark tone that fans to this day still want to see in Star Wars. But now, we can only wonder what could have been. Now, let's go back to one of the earliest and most ambitious Star Wars games ever made. Star Wars Galaxies. Released in 2003 by Sony Online Entertainment, Galaxies was a massive multiplayer online game that offered something no other Star Wars title had before: the ability to truly live in the Star Wars universe as whoever you wanted to be. You could be a bounty hunter, merchant, dancer, politician, even an architect building entire player-run cities. The level of freedom and community-driven gameplay was mind-blowing, especially for the early 2000s. It was one of the first MMOs that fully embraced the idea of a player-driven world. You could own property, run a cantina, craft weapons and armor and sell them to other players. You were encouraged to write your own story in the Star Wars galaxy. But the feature that many might remember, and the one that started the downfall of the game, was the Jedi system. At launch, becoming a Jedi wasn't just difficult. It was almost mysterious. Unlocking the Jedi class meant grinding for months, mastering a number of professions, completing plenty of quests, and unlocking various force skills and abilities. But many players didn't want to wait. They wanted to be able to access the Jedi class immediately. And so, after many complaints and declining player numbers, Sony decided to rework the game. In 2005, they launched the New Game Enhancements, or NGE, which completely overhauled Star Wars Galaxies into a more traditional, action-oriented MMO. The profession system became much simpler. Jedi became a starting class, and complex systems like player housing, professions, and crafting were simplified or removed altogether. Basically, the game went from being a social sandbox to a more traditional MMO. Many players were furious as the game essentially lost what made it so unique, and the backlash was instant. Many long-time players felt betrayed and servers started to empty. And while Galaxies continued to exist until 2011, it never recovered from the NGE update. What's worth noting is that Star Wars Galaxies predicted so much of what we now love in modern MMOs and live service games. Player-driven economies, we see that in EVE Online or Rust. Buildable cities and roleplay hubs, that's in Fallout 76 or Final Fantasy XIV. If Galaxies had been released today, or if it had just stuck to its original vision, it could have been one of the most groundbreaking live service games in history. Now, we did eventually get another Star Wars MMO in 2011, Star Wars The Old Republic, which still continues to exist today. And while it is a great title, especially when it comes to storytelling and character choice, it's more of a traditional and linear MMO, and not a sandbox that Galaxies was. It lacks the player freedom, the open-ended systems, and community-focused gameplay that made Galaxies so special. And that's why it remains one of the biggest examples of wasted potential, as it really had ideas that were ahead of its time, but then it simply got left behind. Then we have Star Wars Hunters, a game with a great concept that didn't even get a real chance. First announced back in 2021 and developed by Zynga, it was marketed as a hero shooter, clearly inspired by games like Overwatch. It was planned to launch on mobile platforms and the Nintendo Switch, and its concept was quite interesting. It was a competitive multiplayer set in the Star Wars universe, featuring a lineup of original and unique characters like a Wookiee Juggernaut, a Droideka Speedster, and even a Jedi Droid. But problems began almost immediately. The game soft launched in 2021 for Android in select regions, but the communication after that became almost non-existent. For months, fans didn't even know if the game was still alive. It wasn't until mid-2022 that Zynga officially delayed the full release to 2023 and then again to 2024. By the time it finally launched in June of 2024, most people had already forgotten it even existed. And the most frustrating part, less than a year after release, Zynga announced that Hunters would be shutting down in October 2025, with the final update dropping in April of that year. Now, the game did have potential, but it made some fundamental mistakes it never recovered from. First, it was platform choice. Launching a hero shooter exclusively on mobile and the Switch, while completely skipping PC and consoles, was a straight up stupid decision. It instantly limited the audience and alienated a huge part of the hero shooter community. The game was also poorly optimized due to the hardware limitations and would have performed much better if it was released on more platforms. It's hard to expect serious engagement from the audience when they can't even access the game properly. Second is the characters. While the roster definitely had some unique and fun designs, there was a lack of familiar faces. No Jedi, no Sith, no iconic heroes or villains from the wider Star Wars universe. Compared to Battlefront 2 and the popularity of the heroes versus villains mode, we essentially could have had that, which definitely would have drawn more players to the game. Even Marvel Rivals, a free-to-play hero shooter, features actual Marvel characters, and it's thriving thanks to strong community support and franchise appeal. And finally, there was the marketing, or actually the lack of it. After the initial reveal, there was barely any promotion of the game. No major reveals, trailers, or campaigns to build hype around it. I know for a fact that many people didn't even realize Hunters had officially launched, and that says a lot. The game honestly feels like a waste of resources. The idea was definitely there, but the platform limitations, missed character potential, and awful marketing held it back. Maybe if the team had taken the time to optimize it for consoles, secure rights to iconic characters, and actually promote the game, things could have gone very differently. But instead, it became another failed title which was a result of corporate mismanagement, focus on monetization, and honestly, lack of identity, as the game didn't really know what it wanted to be. And finally, we have the game that probably every Star Wars fan has heard of, Star Wars Battlefront 2, released by EA DICE in 2017. It was supposed to be what every fan would have wanted from a multiplayer Star Wars experience. Massive battles across all three eras, iconic heroes and locations, and even space combat. It really had the potential to be the Star Wars game. But when Battlefront 2 launched, it featured one of the worst monetization systems in gaming history. Major characters like Darth Vader, Luke, or Emperor Palpatine were locked behind a massive grind, requiring dozens of hours just to unlock them. EA defended the system by saying players would feel a sense of pride and accomplishment when unlocking their favorite heroes. The statement alone went viral, becoming the most downvoted post in Reddit's history, which just shows how out of touch EA was from its own community. But the controversy didn't stop there. The game's progression system was tied to loot boxes filled with star cards that directly affected gameplay. That meant that players could pay real money to gain an in-game advantage, which fueled the backlash even more, and turned its launch into one of the biggest disasters in AAA gaming. However, instead of abandoning the game, the developers at DICE decided to listen to the players, and the result was actually surprising. Just like EA originally promised, the game received regular free content updates. The Last Jedi season brought new heroes and vehicles, followed by a Han Solo season with themed skins. Then, we received the massive Clone Wars update, introducing planets like Geonosis and Felucia, brand new reinforcements, tons of clone trooper customization, and long requested heroes like Obi-Wan and Anakin. On top of that, they completely reworked the progression system. Loot boxes were removed, star cards were tied to gameplay, and cosmetics became optional purchases. It was essentially a complete turnaround. The players returned, reviews improved, and fans started calling it one of the best comebacks in modern gaming. But just as the game was shaping up to be one of the best multiplayer titles, this happened. In April 2020, the developers dropped the Scarif update, adding content based on Rogue One and the original trilogy. But during the community transmission for that update, the devs announced that their vision for Battlefront 2 was complete, and no more content would be added. It was a completely strange decision, especially since the game's player count was growing, and it was finally in a great place. Later, we found out that the team had actually been working on Ahsoka and Ventress, with Mustafar planned as the next map, but none of it ever saw the light of day. The developers were clearly passionate and actively listening to the community, but it was EA that pulled the plug. And that's the real tragedy of Battlefront 2. Not that it had a bad launch, but that it redeemed itself, rebuilt its reputation, and then got abandoned just as it was getting good. It had great gameplay, a passionate dev team, and all EA had to do was let the team keep building on it. I mean, just imagine seasonal updates tied to The Mandalorian, Andor, or The Acolyte. Even Clone Wars had still so much content that could have been included. New heroes, maps, cosmetics, all of it could have kept the game alive for years. The Star Wars universe is so massive, yet Battlefront 2 only really scratched its surface. And monetization wouldn't even be a problem. A battle pass system like the one in Fortnite or Apex could have worked perfectly, as long as it stayed cosmetic only. I am sure many people would have supported it just to keep this game going for longer. Instead, the game went quiet, and what could have been a true long-term service game was shelved. So even though it wasn't technically cancelled, Battlefront 2 still feels like one of the biggest wasted opportunities in Star Wars gaming. And now that EA seems to be moving on from the franchise, I am worried we might not see another Star Wars game on this scale for a while. There are so many other Star Wars projects I didn't even touch on, like the Mandalorian game that was recently cancelled, or Star Wars Eclipse, which was announced in 2021 and then just disappeared. Honestly, it's hard to stay optimistic as a Star Wars fan sometimes. But with EA no longer holding exclusive rights to the franchise, there is finally hope that we will start getting new Star Wars experiences from other studios, such as Zero Company, releasing in 2026. Let me know in the comments what cancelled Star Wars game you think had the most potential and which game you wish existed. If you want to see more content like this, centered around gaming, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.